Okay, we are live, and I'm going to mute myself and unmute Debbie K. Are you able to see? Okay. Perfect. Okay, let me take this off my YouTube move left. Oh, good. Wherever you want to start, you can.
Start now?
So, sure.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We're welcoming you to our webinar today that is on harnessing technology and digital media to support early literacy in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. We're wanting to support young children's learning and helping them move forward. So we're excited about our webinar. It will be an hour webinar. We're going to be focusing on current research around technology for Minnesota educators in pre-kindergarten through grade 3. It will also have some tips for parents and other adults working with young children. We're particularly interested in looking at expanding our understanding about early literacy and information about using technology to support literacy development. And we're particularly pleased to have Lisa Guernsey here with us today, who is the Director of Early Education Initiative and also the Director of Learning Technologies Project at New America. And New America is a nonpartisan think tank in Washington, D.C. And Lisa, I think you're in D.C. today, right?
Yeah, actually just across the river.
So Lisa has been just pivotal in providing some current thinking around early education and some new strategies and new thinking about supporting early education pre-K to grade 3. She is also a journalist and author. She's a co-author of a forthcoming publication that we're just on pins and needles waiting to have released. It's currently in press. And this publication is going to be just terrific around using technology and digital media in the early years, tools for teaching and learning. And we're expecting that out, I think, later this fall, but Lisa may be talking more about that. So without any further introduction, I want to welcome Lisa to our webinar today as our presenter. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Debbie K. And hopefully everybody can hear me. I am going to share my screen with you all now so that you can see the slides as I'm talking. And feel free to ask questions as I'm presenting, and I'll kind of pause in what I'm, the moments throughout, I'll pause so that I can get everybody's questions in. There's a lot to cover, I think, and I hope that you'll find it really interesting. This is an area that is just, it's fervent. There's so much activity in the world of tech, and media, and there's a lot of concern as well around what this really means for young children and their development and their literacy development in particular. So I'll be focusing on that in these remarks. So let me just quickly tell you a little bit more about me. Don't want to spend too much time on this, but one book that I put out a couple of years back is titled Screen Time, and it takes you through the science of how children learn from screen media up to about age 7 or 8. Most of it's 6 and under, but there's some material in there for elementary school children. It also describes what impedes learning, and so it's a combination of kind of a good and bad story, but it's not at all as dire as some might think. The next thing I wanted you to know is that I am a co-author of this book to come that Debbie Kay briefly mentioned, and it'll be coming out in September from Josie Bass. The title is Tap, Click, Read, Growing Readers in a World of Screens. And in this, I and my co-author, Michael Levine, we are taking readers on a journey through what we're seeing out there in the land of early literacy, early childhood, libraries, school districts, pre-K, child care centers, what we're seeing in terms of the harnessing of technology to help children, and what we also need to be aware of, and some warning signs as well about how to use technology in a way that helps with learning instead of getting in the way of learning. So one of the things I want to quickly do is just give you a sense of where I'm coming from in doing all of this writing. A lot of it has to do with a recognition that a lot of children today are not getting what they need. In our forthcoming book, we describe this as a quiet crisis when it comes to literacy. Rates of reading and proficient reading, children being able to read really well or well enough to really do their homework by the end of 3rd grade, those rates are really low. We're finding that in many cases it's between half to 2/3 of children in the United States who are not reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. We want to figure out how to fix that, but also how to do it in a way that relates to what we know in a 21st century world that children need. But we're filled right now with a really confusing terrain because we're getting a lot of mixed messages. So I'm sure that many of you can relate to the fact that on the one hand, we're being kind of beckoned by the technology, right? We're being told, come on over here, check out all these apps. Surely you want to buy another iPad for your kids in your class. And then on the other side, we're getting these kinds of symbols. We're being told, no, wait a second, do not enter, do not put screens in front of young children. And so this is confusing. These mixed messages are not helping educators, they're certainly not helping parents. And what I want to do now is take you through some information that gives you kind of a sense of the terrain, what we know from science and research about what children have in their hands right now, what their families are dealing with, and then what we know from science about how children will learn best using different tools or not using different tools so that we can make the right decisions for kids and not feel quite so confused. Certainly, we're recognizing that we are in a place where there's a feeling of media overload. It's absolutely valid. There is a lot coming at us, especially in the younger years. It seems that that's become kind of the new area to focus on because kids can so easily tap and click into everything. And there's a worry that this is hurting our relationships with our children, with children's relationships with each other, their ability to have social interactions. So that is absolutely a front and center concern that we need to be aware of. There's a reason for a lot of this too. Things are moving so fast. This screen here just shows you how many apps are now in the iTunes store. So we went from it not even existing as an entity in 2008 to now over 1 million apps available at the tap of a finger, and that's only in the iTunes store. So for those of you who might use an Android device or a Google, use Google Play to download apps, there's a whole raft of hundreds of thousands of apps in those stores as well. There's also a lot of labeling educational going on. So a lot of the things that we are seeing coming at us are being labeled educational so that we, as educators and parents, will think, we need this, but there's not a lot of data on what really is working to help children learn and what really is valid in terms of being called educational. And we'll get into that a little bit today. I will say that it's been heartening to find that the field is really responding to this state of confusion and really trying to help educators. There's been a lot of movement in the past 3 or 4 years that I have found really promising. So I want to take you through a couple of things that are happening out there, resources that can be of use to you as teachers and those who might be working in child care centers. First, there's a growing body of research that's pointing to having a deeper understanding of what really what we need to understand when it comes to children's learning. And I boil it all down to something I call the 3 C's. And this, let me just take you through them really quickly here. A lot of this is in my book Screen Time, but I think this will just help to set the stage for the way I've been thinking about this as I've come through the research and now I'm looking at what's happening in classrooms. The first C is content. We know from research on children as young as 18 months old that what shows up on the screen matters. It's not just about the fact that there's, like, you know, a rectangle that we're peering into. It's the way people are presented on screen. It's the way words are said on screen. It's what's labeled on screen. It's how fast things are moving on the screen. It's whether there's moments on the screen that allow children to really understand, digest, respond to what they're seeing. So that's the first C, content. The content matters. And a lot of it is not made for little kids and yet is labeled as if it's made for little kids. The next C is context, understanding that it's not just what we're seeing on the screen, but who's sitting next to us. What are we talking about? What kind of questions are children asking about what they've seen? What are they doing a few minutes after they've seen something or they've played a game? Are they trying to go to bed right after that? Are they going and playing on the playground right after that? Are they acting out what they've seen? Are they asking new questions? Are they wanting to go and plant a watermelon seed to see if they can grow a watermelon? Those kinds of contextual pieces are really important. And the last C is child, your child, the individual child. And this is becoming an area that more and more research is focusing on, to recognize that every child's different, and we can't have a one-size-fits-all prescription for how to use an iPad with a kid. We need to recognize for what child needing what at this moment, who is at what developmental stage, and then when it comes to media like movies, understanding that some children might get really upset by something that they see in a movie that may not be all that upsetting to another child, and really cueing in to what an individual child is responding to. So that's kind of the research backbone. Let me just tell you that there's several studies, I'm just going to flip through them here, that have come out that can provide some guidance, whether it's Take a Giant Step, which is about how to change the education schools and the teacher pipeline. Technology and Education, Early Education is a brief that looks at libraries and teacher preparation and how those need to be reformed. And then this last piece up here, which I'll just say is really, really worth reading, is a statement that came out from the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NAEYC. And this statement was published a couple of years ago. You can find it online by just typing in NAEYC Technology Position Statement. And it's several pages of research-based recommendations how to think about the use of technology in your classrooms. They go up through early elementary schools in their descriptions. And a book that just came out that builds on that position statement is this one that was edited by Chip Donahue, who is a Dean of Distance Learning at the Erickson Institute. Many of you might know of that institution. And then there's also some great resources coming out from 0 to 3. So the organization known as 0 to 3, which focuses on infants and toddlers, has put out something called Screen Sense. And it's science-based information for educators and parents about how and if and under what conditions to be aware of using screens with young children, what's going to really stimulate the language interactions that they need. So now I'll just take you through, let me actually pause for a moment and see, Doug or WK, if any questions, if anybody's got a question yet. And hopefully you guys can hear me. Is everything okay? All right,
Yes.
I'll keep going.
Yeah, keep going for now.
Okay.
Oh, we do have one question that came in. I'll let Debbie Kay read that.
The question is, Lisa, how much screen time is appropriate for a kindergarten age student?
Yeah, so I actually should have referenced earlier that the question of time is something that's always on our minds, right? We're always wondering, wait, well, just tell me how much time. And I appreciate that question because it is tailored to an age, and that helps a little bit. So let me just give you a couple of answers. I'm not going to be able to give you a one-size-fits-all answer for this. The American Academy of Pediatrics has, in their recommendations, put out that children at that age, so over the age of 2, shouldn't have more than between 1 to 2 hours of screen time each day. However, even in their own documentation, they recognize that the content matters and the context of use matters. And so I find that it's very hard to put a blanket statement on the amount of time if you're not asking yourself, well, are they just watching like kind of junk cartoons that were not built with any kind of learning curriculum and even just exciting, engaging material for children? Are they doing something that's really sparking some new ideas in their mind, sparking conversation? Is it screen time that's around a book and book reading or creating a book? Or is it something that's just sedentary and watching? I mean, all of these kinds of questions have to come into play. So I will not myself be able to give a blanket statement of every kindergartner should have X amount of hours per day, because it really depends on the child and the content and the content, the context and the content. Okay, so I'll go on ahead here. Please feel free to interrupt me, guys, if there are some big burning questions that come up. Oh, sorry, and let me move. Sorry about this, guys. Let me move through. Okay, so I was just telling you about how the field is responding to this, and now what I want to do is tell you a little bit about some of the research that I've been working on with my co-author, Michael Levine, on this latest book. Michael Levine is the executive director of the Joan Gans Cooney Center, which is a research center that's based in Sesame Workshop. Doesn't look at Sesame Street in particular. Instead, it's about kind of research on new 21st century technologies and how children might learn from them. And he and I have both been, and Michael especially, have been reading and advised a lot by the work of Bronfenbrenner, a theorist who really believes in understanding the whole ecosystem in which children are growing up. So I show you this diagram as just a reminder that the media that we're choosing for children, or the way they're responding to media, is something that doesn't happen in a vacuum, and we have to recognize that all these other things are happening around them. And when we can get it right for kids, it's when they're already feeling nurtured and supported by their families, when they feel like they have libraries, after-school spaces, home schools, parents, everyone helping them to learn language, to see themselves as learners. And then they also have materials, like digital materials, but also print materials, that can aid them in that process. One of the things that we've been pushing is the idea of joint media engagement, the idea that children learn best when there's someone around them who's scaffolding that experience. So at the Cooney Center, they call this the new co-viewing. Used to be that they were looking at co-viewing in Sesame Street, and they found that children who watched Sesame Street with a parent learned more from the experience, and now they're seeing the same thing when it comes to any kind of media, where there's an adult around who is talking with the child about what they're seeing. We did some research on this together. Some of you on this webinar might be aware of a report called Pioneering Literacy in the Digital Wild West that came out in 2012, and that was just a scan of what was happening out there. It's what inspired us to work on this larger book. After we did that report and we looked at the app marketplace, we also looked at what was happening in early childhood centers, we decided to dig even deeper, and those are many of the stories that are in our book. So now I'm going to take you through 3 topic areas that seem to maybe on top of your mind, but are also bubbling up in the research and are also things that we're seeing when we go out to sites and we visit with researchers and teachers and principals and center directors. These three things are what's going on these days with evaluating apps and ebooks. So I'll take you through a little bit of information there. There's a whole field now focused on parent success, sometimes called parent engagement, how to use new tools, whether it's texting or video, to help parents see that they can be, absolutely central in their children's lives, their children's first teacher, that they can be supported in that. And then the third topic that I'd like to talk to you all about is media mentorship, or as I've talked about in the past, media mentors. And who are our media mentors, and where do we find them? So I'll get to that by the end of the presentation. So let's talk a little bit here about apps and ebooks. First, I'm going to tell you about apps. We find that there are a lot of apps, as I said, out there, and a lot of them are aimed at very young children. So we decided as a group, our two teams working on this book, to see what's really being labeled as educational in the App Store and who the developers are of a lot of the apps out here. And this, I think, is information that can really help us to determine whether we're doing a good, not we, I mean me at New America necessarily, but we, like society, are we doing a good job evaluating the apps that are coming at families and educators, and are there new tools that we should have so that we can figure out what's going on out there? First, I'll just tell you that there are a lot of apps, as I said, out there for the 3 to 5-year-old range. That's where the bulk of them showed up in the scan that we did. And then this screen shows you that so far we are seeing that many of the apps that are marketed in this age range are focusing on basic skills of alphabet knowledge and letter sounds. What we did was we actually tracked 23 different skills, and we looked for evidence of those in the descriptions of apps in the app stores. On this slide, you're only seeing 8 of them. These are the top 8 that were mentioned by at least 10 different apps in our app scan. And as I said, a lot of them are these more basic skills, but we did see that reading comprehension and also vocabulary is showing up more than it was back in 2012 when we first scanned the app marketplace. And so we see that as a positive sign that some of the developers are recognizing maybe it's not just about putting ABC in front of young kids, and maybe literacy is a lot more than that. And so here are some tools to do it. I'm happy to talk more about this slide, but I'm going to and come back to it in our Q&A, but I just want to also tell you some other more troubling insights from this research, and that is that we found just almost no information on who the developers are of a lot of the apps that are in the App Store. So it was very rare to see any mention of an education expert or a child development expert involved in the creation of these apps. Now, that doesn't mean that they weren't there. It just means that the companies creating the apps did not put any of that information out there for the public to, or for the consumer to look at. And we were not just looking at the App Store. We were also clicking on websites for the creators of these apps, trying to find some evidence of who might be doing the developing. And why is that important? Well, we really do know a lot from research on older media, such as TV, about how important it is to have a child development expert involved in the creation of media for children. We have really good results from the different shows that you see on this screen, whether it's Sesame Street or Barney, Blue's Clues, Super Y. There have been methodologically sound studies done on those particular TV shows, and there are shows that were built with a curriculum where a child development expert, in fact many often, came together to review the materials and make sure that they were appropriate for young children. And those are the kinds of materials that are having good effects for kids. So now I'm going to switch from apps to ebooks and just tell you a little bit about what we're seeing in the ebook arena. I'd love to hear what you guys are finding in this as well, because this is a very fast-moving area. But here are some things to think about and to look for when you are trying to decide whether to use ebooks with young children or trying to decide between different ebooks. And these are based on studies that have been done on ebooks and living books, and even some old CD-ROM studies from a decade or more ago. The first thing is to just ask, as you're looking at it, is this really a book or is it just a movie? Is it give children a chance to read, actually read print on screen, or is it just about listening or watching? Does the book have visuals for the text on the page? So a lot of the more well-made ebooks will have highlighted text that are associated with the sounds made by either the syllables in the words or by the words, and that has been linked in a few studies to some skill building for children. You want to look and make sure that there are not hot spots that are distracting to kids, and we have several studies now that are backing up the fact that if a child has to kind of click on this or pop on this or wants to like move over here and suddenly is playing or even playing a game in the middle of a book, that child will not remember a lot of the narrative of the book and may have a hard time retelling the story. And these are key skills we need our children to learn as they're learning all of these literacy skills. And also find out if conversation is encouraged. Some ebooks are designed to prompt someone next to a child to ask questions or for a child to respond. And we have some early evidence that can be really helpful for children. And then lastly, look and see if there's any way that the book might be sparking learning outside of the screen. Is it something that's encouraging or prompting children to, as I said before, go and plant a watermelon seed, or go and build something out of a cardboard box? Because those offline screen moments are, as we know, so incredibly valuable for kids, and finding things that help to trigger that real-world experience is great. One last thing about ebooks that I wanted to note is that there are a couple of studies that are showing that adults can get in the way. And let me describe what I mean here. They're not getting in the way, meaning that they're suddenly like taking over for kids, but instead what they're doing is they might be reading an ebook with the child, and instead of talking or asking the children something like, does George have a hat? Where's George's hat? Instead of something about the content, the adults are saying things like, don't click on that, or be sure to click on that, or turn the page, or don't turn the page. So everything the adults are saying that's coming out of their mouths is about the mechanics instead of about the story. And we've seen this, as I said, in a couple of studies already, one that was a fairly thorough national study. So we, as adults working with children, need to just kind of check our own behaviors and say, wait, are we acting differently because this is a screen device? So I'll pause for a second, and then I can go into some of the parenting tools, and then I wanted to talk about media mentors, and then I can open it up to questions. But let me know if you'd like me to answer anything right now.
Hi, Lisa. This is Debbie Kay. This is Debbie Kay. And there was a question that someone was wondering about. Are there recommendations that educators can use to help promote co-viewing or that joint media engagement?
So that's a great question, and those are some tools that we are going to build to accompany this website, to accompany this book. We're building a website. It'll be tapclickread.org. There are just some. I'm just trying to think whether the Joan Gance Cooney's Center's website may have some materials on that. They certainly have some slides. If you were to search co-viewing and Cooney Center, you'll get to one of their big reports. One of the things that I have seen in one of their recent reports that is very valuable for even me as a parent to think about is to just really stop and watch what your children or your students are engaged with. And when they seem, many times, if you seem interested, they will start showing you things, and then they may have a question about what they're seeing, and that's that moment to take that to another level for them. So one of their examples in one of their reports is a child who was watching a Disney movie, I think it was Ice Age, and the child was getting more and more interested in it, and his father happened to be there, and the child asked, "Daddy, do they have buses in the Ice Age?" And that was a moment for the parent to really jointly watch a little bit more with the child and then say, "Oh, no, there's not buses because this was a really long time ago, and let me go and find another video," and went on YouTube and found another video to show what the Ice Age was really all about. Those are the kinds of moments that will trigger that joint engagement. I hope that helps.
If I could just jump in, Lisa. If anyone has questions for Lisa, feel free to enter those on the Google Hangout, which is just below the video feed. Debbie Kay and myself will be watching for that. And I know Lisa's taking time for questions later. We also can jump in with questions. So again, if you have questions, feel free to enter those at the Google Hangout.
Great.
Lisa, we
Yes.
have one more question.
Good, good.
Okay, so the question is a real book to have the actual book in hand better than an e-book? And what does the research say about the difference between that real paper, hardcover, paperback book versus an e-book?
Right. So, yeah, it's like a key question. I'm glad someone asked it. The research so far really does start to point into these 3 C's, even when it comes to ebooks. So we have right now, a lot of us who have grown up with paper books have a real a preference for paper, and may also be seeing a lot of schlocky stuff coming out of some of the electronic, even in the app marketplace. And so I myself get that the idea that you might be just thinking that paper books are going to be better for kids. But as many librarians have pointed out to me as I've done this research, there are a lot of paper books for kids or print books for kids that aren't even all that great either, where the content's not all that engaging, and there's no rich language. It's not, the illustrations are not so great. So one of the things that I think is important is to start looking for quality in our print materials for kids as much as we're looking for it in our ebooks for kids. Now, there's lots of other things to take into account too, right? There's the feeling of the paper in the hand, the motion of turning the page, and whether that's helping children to understand how books are put together, that codex, and the importance of that. The codex is the word for something where you can move the pages by turning them. And these are huge moments for print awareness and print literacy for children. And we do not have good studies yet that show whether or not children still really need that, but it's pretty hard to replicate in an ebook experience. So there are some educators I know in Head Starts around the country and other places who are trying to make sure they do both, where they'll show an ebook and then they'll bring in the print books, and often the kids flock to the print books. They're so excited to see the real version of what they saw on an iPad, for example. We also have, on the other hand, some research coming out on how text highlighting and some audio narration may be helping children with fluency, and that's something that's not easily, it just really doesn't happen in a print book, especially if it's not a book where there's a person right next to a child pointing, reading, and sounding out the words. So what we have to do is take stock of the qualities in ebooks that are valuable for literacy and the qualities in print books that are valuable for literacy, and then do that kind of comparative analysis for each book that we're looking at. And we're in the early stages of how to do that, but there are a couple of researchers that are trying, and one is Jeremy Brook, sorry, I'm saying his name wrong, Brook at the University of Akron in Ohio, and he's building a quality rating tool for ebooks, and many children's librarians are doing the same. So we might have more tools coming in the future. Okay, that's a long answer. Sorry. Let me go on. I'll go through some of the parenting, the tools that can help to engage parents, and then I'll get to media mentorship, which is similar to some of those ebook questions. So I did want you all who are listening to know that at New America we have a series of projects coming that are looking at how tools are being used to engage parents. And what we're doing is we're from what we're learning, we've been surveying the field, we are mapping what we're finding. And this summer, we will launch a free interactive map where you can see spotlighted on the map that, oh, in San Francisco, okay, they're using text messaging there to reach out to preschool parents. Oh, and I see over here in New York, they're using videos with pediatricians in the doctor's office to help show what book reading looks like. So there's a lot of different initiatives underway, and we're trying to get a handle on all of them. Things are moving very fast, and we feel like this could be valuable for educators as well as for leaders in these communities to know who's doing what. Let me tell you quickly about texting, video, and tablets. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. When it comes to texting, we, like I said, have seen, and this is happening in San Francisco, and in Chicago, and then there are examples sprinkled out throughout, maybe even in Minnesota, and I need to know about it. Cases where a system has been set up to send targeted text messages to parents that either are about just kind of some school readiness ideas for their preschooler, or are even more targeted to nudge parents a little bit to have conversations with their kids, to look at what they're seeing in the grocery store and talk about color and shape, to use the time that they have with their children at the bus stop to read what's on the signs. So these are little nudges, you know, 1 or 2 lines of text, and in some of the studies so far, the San Francisco and the Chicago study, they're actually seeing some positive results coming out of this. There's also been a lot of use of video to show parents, to model for parents, and also for child care teachers and for and preschool teachers as well as kindergarten teachers, how to do dialogic book reading with children, how to play games that have a literacy component. And what that looks like, and being able to see that in short little video snippets has been helpful for many of the parents and educators in these studies. And then the last case is one, and let me see if I can flip to a slide here. Yeah, you know what I'm going to do? Okay, so this slide here on Ready Rosie, this is showing one of those video modeling tools and how it's used. This is actually a for-profit company called Ready Rosie that works with and offers this system to school districts so that parents and teachers can have a video to look at. And then I was going to tell you about tablet use. Sorry that this is a little fuzzy here, but this is a picture of a program. This is a picture of parents and their children with a program specialist in Maine. In Millbridge, Maine, and they are working with immigrant families and using tablets to build suites of learning materials that families can use at home, ideas for cooking projects that engage them in new literacy, outdoor activities, ways they can look things up in the library using different books, and ways to help their children even take pictures and make little mini books of what they've taken pictures of. So it's a really engaging and promising program that's going on in Maine, and the tablet is the basis of it. That's what really gets the kids pretty excited about it. So those are just some examples of parent engagement. And lastly, I just want to take you all through what media mentorship is and how we might start thinking of the concept of media mentor as a new job description for the 21st century. I really believe that in the early childhood world, our teachers and our center directors, our leaders, our principals either need to become media mentors themselves or need to find someone who can be their media mentor, because there's so much out there for us to navigate. We all need mentors and coaches around us. When I talk about media mentors, and I've done this quite a bit lately, I'm envisioning that envisioning what I as a parent found so helpful, which was someone to lean on. Sometimes it was say my brother or someone in the library who knew enough about some of the tools and some of the things in the app marketplace that could help me with my children. And if all families had access to someone who could help them navigate, find the right tools, avoid the bad stuff, recognize when they shouldn't be using screens all the time, then I think that we might be in better shape. These are people who should not be judgmental. This is someone who's really along to help families. So, and I really do see more and more evidence that families and parents need this. I'm putting this up on the screen not because I want us all to think that parents are bad for using cell phones, but because I think a lot of us have worried and seen what it means when we as adults have our devices with us all the time. And as it shows here in this Time magazine article, people are worrying that children are not going to be able to even get their parents' attention anymore. So I think one of these kind of 21st century new job descriptions will be how we as human beings can navigate, be curators of all the material that's coming into our lives through various screen media, and then make sure that we're interacting with our children in rich, language-rich ways instead of kind of leaving them on their own. One of the things that some of the media mentors that I do know of some media mentors who are out there, often in children's libraries, that are working towards this. They're using websites like this one that I'm putting up on the screen now. This is a screenshot from Common Sense Media. And if you haven't heard of Common Sense Media, I encourage you to go to their website and check it out. They've been around for many years. They are very well respected, and they have a whole team of writers and reviewers who are looking at what's out there and what's going to be good for kids at various ages. And some other resources to consider, and certainly those that are in this kind of idea of working towards media mentorship, I wanted to just certainly point out two untapped resources. Your library is one. I mean, I hope that libraries, the librarians that you know are seeing the need to be alert to digital media, are not just pushing it to the side and are actually really trying to get a handle on what's good and what's bad, because we need our librarians and we need them to be doing that for us. And then we also need our local public media, and often our local public media stations, our PBS stations, can be a really good resource to parents and to educators. They themselves have clips of learning moments. They have things that can be used for video modeling. They have ideas that can help spark new activities in classrooms. And if you go to pbsparents.org, you'll see a lot of those resources. So let's see. I want to leave you all with just a little, oops, sorry, I went too fast there. Just a little bit more information about this book that's to come, and then I'm excited to open it up to questions here. I wanted to explain a little bit more about the title of this forthcoming book. Why did we call it Tap, Click, Read? Well, what we are doing in this book, we're describing a lot of the different initiatives out there in the world. We're looking at the ebook research. We are scanning the app marketplace. But we're also really trying to put out a call to action for educators and parents too. But really, we really are aiming at educators in this to think of themselves as absolutely integral in building the next generation of readers. Of course, reading teachers may already think of themselves that way, but all of the people who are in children's lives and who are helping them navigate media, no matter how it's coming at them, they're the ones that are going to help kids become literate. And so what we are trying to do is to help people think about taking what we call a tap, click, read mindset. So what is that? The tap means to tap into new resources, both digital and print, to not favor one or the other, but to recognize the strengths in each one, and then to bring those together to help children, that hybrid model. So that's about tapping into resources. The click is to recognize that we are in a hypertextualized world and that clicking is choosing. So our children, when they're pressing on something, when they're clicking on something, that's them wanting to be engaged, choosing to do that. So let's pay more attention to that, and let's help to direct that to things that are learning oriented. And then, of course, the word read, is central to everything that we're putting out there, because we fully believe that reading will still be absolutely a primary and a critical skill for the 21st century, that it's not going to all be about visual learning, and that the way even we read visual material will need to be much more sophisticated. But we have to recognize what it really means to raise children who are literate in the 21st century, that it's not just about knowing the ABCs or reading a couple of words on a page or even knowing knowing vocabulary, but really understanding how media works, how to express ideas, how to have some critical thinking about the material that's coming at us. And we have to be starting to build that in our children at an early age. So that is it from me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you all. I'm just showing you a few of the people or the foundations who have helped to fund this work, and I would be more than happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I know Debbie Kay has been getting a few emails coming through with some questions. Do you have any further ones? Otherwise, while she's kind of pulling the questions together, just remind you that if you would like to respond to Google Hangout, if the video has popped out, you might have to go back to the previous screen. But where you checked in, you'll be able to ask any questions, and we will relay those to Lisa. So, Debbie Kay?
Sure, thanks, Doug. And thank you, Lisa, for just the outstanding presentation about your research and your work that you've been doing. It's really fascinating. One of the questions that has come up is about children or young students creating their own materials using technology that actually advances their literacy development. What are your thoughts about children engaging in technology, whether it be, creating some type of an e-book, version of that, or other approaches to support different components of literacy development?
Yeah, so I think it's really exciting. I think the potential is it's just incredibly strong at ages that we may not have ever imagined. So I have seen ebooks created by 4-year-olds, and they're in fact, one of the boys in that picture of that program from Maine is a little boy named Jaden who created a book about the color red, and he went outside and he took pictures of his dad's red truck and some leaves on the ground that were red and some other things that were red, and he was also doing this bilingually. He's a Spanish speaker, so it was about rojo, about the color rojo, and then he and his mother helped a little bit, but she was still getting used to the tools. And he was able to do a decent amount of this by himself. I mean, they did have the help at the very beginning of the home visitor who was there in their home, but he created this book, and then the pride that he had in showing this book, and these are all my pictures of the letter red, and then the words that he was able to use in saying how he made it. Those are real stepping stones to 21st century literacy. So it's not just about knowing the letter red or knowing that it starts with the letter R. It's that he was an author, that this kind of work went into building it. Another example that we have in the book is at a first grade classroom, a group of children who were singing a chant at the beginning of the school day about the weather. And halfway through the chant, one of the little kids, one of the first graders, not so little, said, "I don't like this song. This isn't my weather." And the class stopped, and the teacher was very flexible and said, "Well, what would you want the song to say?" And then took some time with the class to think about new words that they would use in building the song. They created a video, a music video of their new weather song, and then they broadcast it to the school. These are moments that really help children see that they have the power, they can have authorship, but they can also start to understand the motivations of why you put certain things together in the way you do, what words you use, etc.
Thanks. I think that's just a terrific example about children being creators of perhaps new knowledge for them or with their group of students. So thank you so much, and I think Doug probably resonated a little bit to the weather example, being our STEM specialist at the Department of Ed. So. Absolutely. And I think you probably see that a lot too.
Absolutely,
well.
Yes.
Another question that has come in is around ways that we can support the development of that interaction. You alluded to that in some of your comments, Lisa, around whether it be interaction with the adults, with the print material, or interaction with the technology aspect of it. And how do you find the balance between engaging and interacting as an adult with the child or the student versus engaging, just focusing on the technology and trying not to lose sight of either one of it?
Right, right. Yeah, I think it is a tricky balance, especially when we're learning at the same time. So just two thoughts have come to my mind. I'm just going to say straight out that there's not really good research on this yet. So these are kind of a little bit of gut reactions from what I've seen. One is that I have learned that even as we as adults are using something with children, if we are able to describe the process as we're, like, verbalize what we're doing with our kids while we're doing it, that helps them to see what's happening in our head, the thought process we're using. So if we're frustrated because we're trying to search for something and we don't seem to have the right keyword, instead of just being silent about it, and you maybe have a gaggle of kids around you and you're not, instead of being silent about it, talk about it. Say, well, I'm going to put this keyword into this as a search box. I'm going to put this keyword in. I'm going to use the keyword rojo. I'm going to add another word. And just verbalizing like that can help children see what it looks like to navigate, what it looks like to use tools, and what the thought process is. The other thing, though, that I think is hard for a lot of us is to really try to focus on the content. We get so dazzled by the technology. So that example of parents who are reading ebooks with their children and they're saying, click here, click, don't click there. That's in a way parents and teachers, right, wanting to have real control because they don't really, this is all new to them. But if we can kind of let go of that a little bit and let the content speak to us, let the content speak to children, and then here, there, or try to guide them to questions about what stories we're seeing on the screen, that can get us back to the same kinds of good dialogic reading that we see in print books.
Great. Are there any other specific examples of ways to evaluate or criteria that can be used when looking for apps or ebooks, aside from knowing perhaps who is the publisher, the developer, the author of it? Are there kind of a rigor around that evaluation process?
Yeah, not so much yet, and I think there needs to be. So one thing that we are seeing, however, is that there are curators who are popping up. So I mentioned Common Sense Media. They have a rubric. They don't share it in some way. It's proprietary. They don't tell you exactly how they're grading everything, but they are grading certain apps against what they see as learning standards. I know that children's librarians are building a lot of these as well, and in our book coming this September, we have in the back of one of the chapters a list of all sorts of different curators, whether it's, there's something out there called Teachers with Apps, and they're building their rubric for how they would grade apps. There's something out there called Balefire Labs that has a very rigorous system for evaluating whether apps are educational or not. So I think we're at the early days of that. I would, though, I think it does say a lot about an app. If it has absolutely no information about who's created it or even how it's funded, it seems to me to be a little bit iffy. If you can't find anything on the website about it, who is this company? Where are they coming from? I would steer clear.
Mm-hmm. Doug, do you have any other thoughts about the technology piece of supporting children's literacy development from your lens?
Well, one of the questions that actually I got through email from someone who's watching here talked about as we think about literacy is a much broader conversation than it's ever been as we look at technology. And one of the ways that we're thinking about literacy is thinking about some of the coding language, particularly around Lego WeDos and programming with that, or with Scratch Junior at early childhood. Thoughts in regards to how we're able to connect that form of literacy with some of the other e-textbooks or other e-books or other types of uses that are out there.
Yeah, yeah. So it's so interesting. I mean, the broadening definition of literacy, it's absolutely true that, and in the book we described, traditional literacy, which already was pretty broad, because people sometimes think it's just about reading. No, it's about listening and speaking and and understanding. Just in terms of just the way we use language, right? So already traditional literacy is much deeper than many people think. And then there are all these new literacies around being able to make sense of media in terms of the, just recognizing that there's a creator behind it, and what is their motivation? Is this just a commercial? Is this just an advertisement? There's that kind of literacy that we all need to do a better job of helping our kids see so they can build on it in their early years. And then there's there's digital literacy, whether it's just kind of knowing to use a search engine, or there's coding and knowing how all of these different materials were built in the first place, and recognizing that there's code behind what we're seeing. I think, and it's been very interesting to see that in the early elementary years, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head exactly the name of it. There's a block program that's used that Tufts University was doing some research on in kindergarten and first grade that was not Scratch Junior, but it was similar. And I mean, we're talking kindergartners who are learning, using physical blocks, but using the fundamentals of blocks to learn the fundamentals of how to code something to happen. And one of the big questions, and I just don't have an answer for this, is how much of this do we do at these early years, and do we need a sequence? And what's going to help children learn and not feel overwhelmed by it all? So that's where we need our developmentalists. We need those people who understand the learning brain at these young years to recognize, well, you know what, let's not try this yet at age 4. Let's do this part, and that will give them the foundation to then by age 7, do Scratch Junior. So I stay tuned, because I feel like that's a really big area of research that's coming.
Shifting gears just a little bit, here's another question that came in on the email, is that it's about the program in Maine that you had mentioned, Lisa, that had worked with immigrant families, and they're wanting a little bit more information about the organization that started the program and a few more details. Can you?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad, actually, the things I meant to say is that program and several others are going to be in the book as video vignettes. So they'll be described in the book, but then we also will have embedded in the pages of the ebook these 5 to 6 minute videos that take you to these places, and you can see the children, the parents, the librarians, the teachers, the classroom, and many of these. That one is one of the videos we have. The title of that program is Comienza en Casa, and it's run by a program called Mano a Mano in Millbridge, Maine. And it's I think Mano a Mano has a much broader mission in helping families who, originally it was migrant families who came for the blueberry picking harvest in Maine, and were not there year-round, but more and more the families are there year-round, and so they're helping them to acclimate, to learn English, and to work with their children in the school system.
Great. Well, thank you.
So you can search for Comienza en Casa, and you should see actually several things come up, because I've written about them a few times, and other people have too.
Okay.
Great. We have one more question that came through, and then I'll let Debbie K. kind of make some concluding remarks here. The question is, what would your top tips, not just tips, but top tips, be to share with parents as they go about purchasing apps and what they are allowing their children to play? Should every game be considered educational? Is it okay for some to be about fun and imagination?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. One tip that I didn't mention, but that I, as a parent, think is pretty important, is to know whether an app is going to be asking your child to purchase more and more stuff once they're in the app. So this is called the in-app purchase, and it doesn't mean that you should always avoid those apps. It just means be aware of them. because some of in games, but also in ebook-like apps, you'll find that you think you've downloaded something that's free, or you think it's only 99 cents, but then you get in it and you're like, oh, to really get the book, I now have to spend $5.99. Or my child really wants to get to the next level of this game, and she's begging me to like buy yet another thing to do it. So that's one thing. I do think that before going to the education category in the iTunes store, that it can really help to go to some of these websites like Common Sense Media or Teachers with Apps first, because you can get a little bit misled, I might say, in the iTunes store. So that, you know, they have an education category, but nobody's vetting. Nobody with an education background is really vetting those apps. Now, I think Apple's working on that, but right now they're in they're on that shelf because they themselves labeled themselves there. They decided to put themselves on the education shelf. So you need a curator, a guide, somebody else outside of that Apple store to help you. And those websites I mentioned are good. And if you can check in with your children's library and see if they are seeing themselves as media mentors yet or not. Some are. Some are like, yes, I've been watching this. I know of several websites of good ebook apps. Here's what you should do. Others are a little wary still, but if you can get lucky enough to find a librarian who's forward-looking like that, that can be a great help to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for your presentation today. It was just outstanding, and it was some food for thought as we broaden our thinking around how to use technology and digital media to support the broadest notion of literacy development in young children. So thank you so much. And there were a couple of takeaways that I just want to, with some keywords that we were talking about keyword searches earlier. And a couple of things came to my mind, and one of them was around quality, and to focus on the quality of whatever the product or the material or the experience is for the child and the adult together, or the children and the adult together, and the quality of whether it be a print material or the technology piece itself. So quality was something that you certainly wove throughout your presentation today. And then the other thing that I heard was about interactions, that the interactions need to be meaningful and intentional between the adult, whether it be the teacher, the caregiver, the parent, with the children as they're working on using different types of technology approaches with children. And then certainly supports and engagement in a broader sense for those adults that are working with the children. So whether it be a kindergarten teacher or pre-kindergarten a teacher, child care providers, or even librarians that working together to have enough supports in place that children can become effective users and creators of the technology. So those were some key things that I think that we heard throughout your presentation today.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, those are, yeah, you just said the whole presentation. That's perfect.
Well, thank you so much. And I also want to thank especially Doug Paulson. He's been my media mentor today using our Google Hangouts. So thanks so much, Doug. And Doug, again, is our STEM specialist at the Minnesota Department of Education. And he's been just outstanding in helping to continue to extend our reach around supporting teachers and families around the state. So thanks so much, Doug, for your work today. And then I also want to just do a shout out to Corey Stye, who is our reading specialist also at the Department of Education. And he wasn't able to join us today, but he certainly has been part of the conversations about how we can expand supports and learning for our youngest learners in Minnesota. So again, thank you so much for all the work, and thank you to all of you who joined our conversation today.
This will be posted on YouTube and through our department's website, so people will be able to go back and listen to some of the things that Lisa was saying. If you're like me, jotting down and thinking down some of these notes, it'd be good to listen to things afterwards as well. And if you are looking to get a CEU for participating, please send an email to WK or myself, and we will make sure we get CEUs. So with that, we thank you, and we'll stop the broadcast right now.
Thank you very much.